Hello, everyone. My name is Melissa Katsoris, and I'm the Publication and Events Manager at the Center for Migration Studies of New York, also known as CMS. First and foremost, I'd like to thank you all for joining us for a presentation on a very important report titled Charitable Legal Immigration Programs and the US Undocumented Population, a study in access to justice in an era of political dysfunction. This report is available on the CMS website and is published in the Journal of Migration and Human Security. The report examines the charitable legal capacity available to low-income immigrants on national, state, and sub-state levels. CMS compiled data on charitable legal immigration programs and their legal professionals from several data sources. CMS would like to thank the Ready to Stay Coalition, who partnered with us on this study, the Catholic Legal Immigration Network, also known as CLINIC, US Department of Justice Executive Office of Immigration Review, also known as the EOIR, and the Immigrant Advocates Network that were sources of the data that we used to this report. We'd also like to thank the Carnegie Corporation of New York, the Grove Foundation, and Stand Together for supporting CMS's work on this project. Today, the authors of the report, Donald Kerwin and Evin Millet, will provide an overview of the findings and research methodology of this study, and we will hear guest remarks and discussion from our guest speakers, Stephen Lang, the Program Director of the Office of Legal Access Programs for the EOIR, Anna Gallagher, the Executive Director of CLINIC, and Rodrigo Camarena, the Director of the Immigrant Advocates Network. After their remarks, we will answer questions from the audience, so please feel free to submit your questions at any time by clicking the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We'll start with Evin Millet, who will explain the top-line findings and research methodology of the report. So Evin, please go ahead.
Thank you, Melissa. And thank you everyone for joining us today. Like Melissa mentioned, I'm going to start off by talking about the methodology of our study and review some high-level findings with you. So our study examines the legal capacity available to low-income immigrants on the national, state, and sub-state levels. We used legal professionals working in charitable immigration service programs as a proxy for legal capacity and undocumented immigrants as a proxy for legal need. Next slide, please. The data for the undocumented immigrant population is based on CMS own estimates using the 2019 American Community Survey data. And to compile a data set for charitable immigration service programs and legal professionals, we combined and supplemented 3 data sources. The first one is the Department of Justice's roster, which contains information on accredited representatives of recognized organizations. This roster, however, doesn't list the representatives' office locations for organizations with multiple offices. We also used the Catholic Legal Immigration Network and the Immigrant Advocates Network rosters for information on office locations of accredited representatives. We collected additional information on attorneys, paralegals, and legal assistants using Evin's roster as well as agency websites. In this way, CMS was able to supplement and update these sources with information from the websites of charitable immigration programs, and we added legal programs to the data set that did not appear in any of these lists. Next slide, please. So in the end, CMS compiled a data set consisting of 1,800 charitable legal immigration programs and over 7,300 legal professionals. So we define legal professionals to be attorneys, fully and partially accredited representatives, paralegals, and legal assistants. So an accredited representative is a person who is approved by the Assistant Director for Policy or the Assistant Director's designee to represent immigrants before the board, the Immigration Court, and DHS. A fully accredited representative may represent immigrants before the board, immigration courts, and DHS, whereas partially accredited representative may only represent individuals before DHS. So these representatives must work for a nonprofit, religious, charitable, social service, or similar organization that has been recognized by EOIR to represent immigrants. Paralegals and legal assistants are not authorized to practice law or appear before the immigration court, but they do support legal practitioners. So through our study and analysis of this data, we found that there are around 1,400 undocumented immigrants in the US for every 1 charitable legal professional. Next slide, please. So when we look at our state level analysis, the first table shows the states with the highest undocumented immigrant populations. California, Texas, and Florida are also among the top 5 states with the highest number of legal professionals and organizations that provide legal services. However, because of the high numbers of undocumented immigrants in these states, the legal representation there is still lower than the national average. The middle column here shows the number of undocumented immigrants for every legal professional. Again, the national average is around 1,400 undocumented persons per legal professional. So a lower number here means greater legal capacity. So the second table shows the states with the highest levels of legal representation, or in other words, the fewest undocumented residents per each legal professional. So these are the states with the greatest legal capacity: West Virginia, Washington, D.C., Montana, Maine, and Wyoming. They also have relatively low undocumented immigrant populations. Next slide, please. So here we see legal capacity at the sub-state levels, with metropolitan areas on the left and counties on the right. These are the top 15 most populated metro areas and counties, ranked from the highest to lowest by number of undocumented immigrants. Our sub-state analysis shows that the New York, Newark, New Jersey metropolitan area has 849 undocumented immigrants per each legal professional, so quite a bit more legal representation than the national average of 1,400 undocumented immigrants per legal professional. On the other hand, this number goes up to 5,000 in the greater Riverside area in California, and over 3,000 in the areas around Dallas, Houston, and Phoenix. The Boston area shows the greatest legal representation on this metropolitan area list, with around 600 undocumented for every legal professional. At the county level, we see a similar range between 600 to 6,000, with Kings County, New York, showing the greatest legal representation, and San Bernardino County, California, showing the lowest level of representation. And finally, let's move to the last slide, please. So if you're interested in using this data for additional studies or want more details, CMS can provide data on the total number of organizations, legal professionals, and undocumented immigrant population. On the slide, here is an example of the type of data we can provide, which can help to conduct additional research. So please feel free to contact us if you would like any more information in areas that might be of interest to you. Thank you very much, and I will turn it back over to Melissa.
Thank you, Evin. Next, we'll hear from Stephen Lang. So please go ahead, Stephen.
Hello, everyone. Melissa, can you hear me? Great. Well, first of all, thank you to CMS for this opportunity to present today. I also want to congratulate you on the report. We're happy that we could be helpful with some of the data that was used in the analysis. My office plans to use the findings of the report to help inform our outreach efforts to expand both the list of pro bono legal service providers and the recognition and accreditation program. So for those of you, just to give you an update on the pro bono list, everyone who has an immigration court hearing gets a copy of the list of pro bono legal service providers that's put together for that particular court. So a report like this is a great new tool to assist us in identifying areas of greatest need so that we can conduct more outreach in these areas and consider new ways to improve the use of the list. When it comes to the RNA program, as we know, much of the data that was used in the report came from the RNA rosters. Many of you are affiliated with these organizations and may be interested in, what the current status of the adjudication delays are. And I'm happy to report that we've moved a lot more staff and implemented new procedures in order to improve the number of cases that we process. And this is already having a great impact on the backlog. So we're optimistic that the public will start seeing the results of this in the next couple of months. Some other programs to touch upon that EOIR carries out. First, we're known for some large contract programs like the Legal Orientation Program, the Legal Orientation Program for Custodians of Unaccompanied Children, the Immigration Court Help Desk Program, which is very similar to the Legal Orientation Program, and the somewhat new Family Group Legal Orientation Program. So those programs are all about providing access to legal services in the form of non-representation, orientation, and information for folks to help prepare them to make decisions earlier, better informed decisions earlier in the process, so as to facilitate the entire process. Now, aside from the orientation programs, EOIR does fund a couple of representation programs. First and foremost, the National Qualified Representative Program, which provides appointed counsel, known as qualified representatives, to individuals in ICE custody who've been determined to be mentally incompetent to represent themselves. So this is like a small, public defender type of system that we've been operating since 2013. Recently, a couple of years ago, we started up the Counsel for Children initiative, which provides representation to limited numbers of children. I think this year we're at like 227 or so. Children who are in immigration proceedings and who are not otherwise represented. Aside from these contract programs and what I mentioned, the list of pro bono legal service providers and the RNA program, I do want to draw attention to to one recent regulatory change and to some new policy guidance that we have. First of all, with regard to policy guidance, we issued at the very beginning of 2022, the director's memo on encouraging and facilitating access to pro bono legal services. So if you're not familiar with that, please do go up on our website. You can find it under policy guidance. That director's memo, I think, offers very encouraging, useful tips, not only for the practitioners, but also for the immigration court staff. It's mostly designed for immigration court staff so as to help them better accommodate the needs of pro bono legal service providers. Also, in later, I think this was at in the spring of 2022, we issued director's memo on friend of the court guidance. Now, the friend of the court is not a representative, it's not an advocate for the person, but does play a very helpful role in facilitating the court process, essentially ensuring that the respondent, the unrepresented respondent, it understands the communications in the court, understands what steps they need to take before they come back to court, understands the various rights and responsibilities that the court is communicating with them, and can help the other way, can help the court understand what any special needs that the respondent has that may not be obvious to immigration court staff. So we're very excited about that program. That program, it's in as much as it's a program, and yes, we do fund some folks to serve in the role of friend of the court through our orientation programs, but we know that the majority of the folks who will be appearing as friend of the court will be volunteers who, with the judge's permission, can step into that role at the immigration court. So not necessarily affiliated with any, government program. And next, I want to highlight that we have a new regulation that was published back in September, and goes into effect November 14th, and that is the new limited appearance rule. So it's a rule that allows for limited appearances for purposes of submitting documents, for purposes of preparing and submitting documents. So this is not limited representation. It's assistance with an application, could be a motion, could be a application for asylum, and other types of documents that are submitted on the court. So we're hoping that this facilitates the in-betweeners, the folks who can, the practitioners who can assist someone in court proceedings without necessarily entering for the entire case and being on the hook for the rest of the proceedings. So we're excited about that, and we'll be rolling out a lot of outreach to the public, frequently asked questions and so forth to help them understand the parameters, the scope, what the rule does, and what it doesn't do. And lastly, which I want to touch upon, is we've gotten new agency legal guidance that allows EOIR to fund legal advice through our legal orientation providers and our immigration court help desk providers. So essentially, even though our orientation providers cannot use that funding for representation, they can use it to provide legal advice, because our interpretation is that legal advice in and of itself, not combined with other services, do not constitute representation requiring the submission of an EOIR 28 or notice of appearance as attorney or representative. And that's it. I'll pass it back to Melissa.
Thank you, Stephen. Next, we're going to hear from Anna Gallagher. So please go ahead, Anna. Anna, you're on mute.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Melissa. Thank you, Don. Thank you, Evin. Thank you, the entire CMS team for all the work you did on researching, writing, presenting, and sharing this report and organizing this webinar. And thank you, Steve, and to EOIR for all your work and your leadership in expanding access to justice, and for the information you shared about that. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Clinic, and talk about the importance of legal representation and some of the takeaways that we see that are important from this report. And then I always end with questions. I sometimes often have more questions than answers. So let me start by explaining who the Catholic Legal Immigration Network is, or Clinic. Clinic is an affiliate network with over 450 faith and community-based legal services organizations. We are located in 49 states and the District of Columbia. Together, we, and when I say we, I'm speaking of attorneys, accredited reps, paralegals, and support staff, serve over 500,000 immigrant clients each year, making it the United States' largest immigration law organization. I like to say that we're the largest nonprofit immigration law firm. Lawyers and accredited reps, as Steve was sharing, can and do represent immigrants before the immigration courts and the Immigration Service, USCIS. So what does Clinic do? We provide training and support to our affiliate partners so that they can provide the best and most up-to-date legal services possible for their clients. We also engage in federal, state, and local advocacy and other special projects to advance the dignity and well-being of migrants based on our foundation in Catholic social teaching. So our vast network of legal experts, including over 2,300 accredited reps, which I believe, Steve, form almost half of all accredited reps approved by DOJ, not only address the ongoing legal needs of our immigrant and refugee brothers and sisters, but we also mobilize to meet any new unmet needs that may arise. And so, for example, in 2019, when thousands of refugees were arriving and asylum seekers were arriving in our border, we opened a project in Ciudad Juarez, the Estamos Unidos in the project in Ciudad Juarez, to provide legal counsel, legal advice, and assist with some initial work in preparing applications for asylum. We have also worked closely with the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops and other partners to welcome and serve the Afghan refugees when they started arriving, I think it was last year. Our work and our service delivery changes to respond to the ever-changing needs of our immigrant and refugee brothers and sisters. And I would imagine many of you who are listening in understand those changes. So we are always looking for opportunities in difficult situations. And for example, while the COVID-19 pandemic has had many negative implications and has turned the world as we know it upside down, the reimagining of immigration court, consultations, and how we serve has alleviated some of the stressors and allowed for some flexibilities in the process, and especially through the use of technology. And our colleagues here on the panel certainly know that, and especially Rodrigo and Ian. The use of technology, virtual courts, Zoom consultations has been one strong positive outcome that we hope will continue. The past few years has shown that these changes work and should continue to help alleviate the incredible backlogs and the challenges that we all face in the immigration system. I think it's really important, folks, to keep this in mind, the ability and the need to pivot to better serve as our work increases, and to look at situations and see where there exist possibilities. I know that my team talked, initially when the buses were coming from the border, we looked on in horror how people were being transported to places where they didn't necessarily have family. And then we looked at it as an opportunity to receive, to welcome, to gather resources, and receive people in communities throughout the United States and not have people stranded at the border. So we have to maintain that mentality as this situation changes and as we're faced with more challenges. So immigrants, refugees, and communities across the United States are clamoring for more immigration legal services. We certainly know that. The folks that are listening in know that. Our affiliates all report being at capacity, most actually over capacity. So Steve talked a little bit about the DOJ, the Department of Justice recognition and accreditation, and accredited reps. Accredited reps are the backbone of our network, and we continue to support training and their development. We continue to help agencies go through the process of recognition and accreditation so we can expand access to legal aid for more people to build capacity. And it's very important to understand that immigrants with some form of legal representation are far, far more likely to succeed in finding pathways to legal immigration than those with no assistance. So imagine, I believe there's likely thousands of people who are deported from the United States, those who did not have access to legal representation, who should have obtained some form of relief or some path to legal status in the United States, but were denied it because they did not have an immigration legal representative. And there is a dire shortage of free legal assistance available to low-income immigrants. We were very excited, Don, when you and your team started to work on this study. We were excited to share our data with you and with our partners. And while we knew that our organization and our affiliates struggled greatly to meet the needs of their communities, I don't think we realized how dire the situation really was until we saw your report. I'll just repeat a few numbers, and then I'll close. Folks, just keep in mind, the numbers in this report are daunting. There is one legal rep for every 1,413 low-income undocumented persons, especially practitioners on this call, on this webinar. Imagine having a caseload of 1,400. But when you go to Alabama, for example, there's only one rep for 7,000 people. Hawaii, one for 4,500 people. Kansas, one for 3,000. And what was really surprising to me were the metropolitan areas. Well, high numbers of undocumented immigrants. In metropolitan areas, we thought there would be more legal support. Riverdale, San Bernardino, one for 5,300 people. Dallas, Fort Worth, one legal representative for 4,400. Again, these numbers are daunting. This report is important for several reasons. It gives us information on the importance of charitable legal programs to immigrants, families, and communities. It also provides hard and shocking and true numbers on the capacity in the field and the need to provide more capacity. This is a report we can and must use in our advocacy before state and local governments, the federal government, and other stakeholders. So I'll just leave you with a couple questions. This often happens to me. So I'd ask, how can we use this report to increase capacity in our communities? How can we come together and share creative and innovative practices to increase access to immigration legal services while advocating for more support? And how do we think more broadly to identify new partners, businesses large and small, state and local governments, faith-based organizations, universities, colleges, unions, community sponsors, community colleges, to accompany our organizations and our immigrant brothers and sisters as they seek status and support in the United States. So while we address the immediate needs, how do we plan and implement to create a stronger foundation? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anna. Next, we'll hear from Rodrigo Camarena. Rodrigo, go ahead, please.
Hi, everyone. I hope I'm coming through okay. Thank you so much to CMS for inviting me to participate. My name is Rodrigo Camarena. I'm the director of the Immigration Advocates Network. We are also affectionately known as IAN. We're a program of Pro Bono Net and have been doing this work for about 12 years. We're so honored to participate in this research project. And I wanted to give a little bit of background because I think the conversation we're having today really connects to our broader goal as an organization and some of what we've seen in the field more broadly. We are a network of over 10,000 immigrant advocates, but we're also creator of immigration legal tech tools. And the directory that was one of the pieces of information or data for this report is actually one of our first tools and products. So it's one of the largest directory of legal aid organizations supporting immigrants. It has, I think, over 2,000 organizations from around all 50 states, and it's been in existence for almost 10 years. And I think the report that we are learning about today is really the best we could have asked for. We produce this data not just to help immigrants find assistance, but we wanted this data to become available for broader advocacy purposes. We know that there aren't enough legal representatives or attorneys to support every immigrant in need. The mapping that CMS has done to identify the areas in the direst of need is really informative to us, but I also hope to the funding community. We're really lucky to be in Brooklyn, Kings County. Personally, I live here in South Brooklyn, and it's amazing that we have so many attorneys by comparison or legal representatives to other counties, but it's an injustice, right? Clearly, more supply needs to be in other areas of this country. And I think what we are trying to build as IAN is a world where attorneys can represent and support immigrants regardless of where they are. It's one of our goals as an organization. We're trying to leverage technology so that, like Anna said, more folks can be served remotely, virtually. We can really rely on helpers or non-legal staff to support folks with part of the process. Over the years, we've built tools that make pro se or do-it-yourself portions of the application more easily accessible. And I think, while we are a long way from having every single person in need have the adequate representation, we are a shorter amount of the way to having every person in need have access to at least someone that can help them or a tool that can help them. So we want to, as always, if you know our work, really elevate and champion the role of data, technology, and collaboration to help us meet this need in the short, medium, and long term. It's so good to have, the kind of analysis that CMS has done to really have us harness our efforts collectively as advocates. But I also think it's a good reminder to all of us that we're never going to satisfy the need with enough attorneys. So we have to be creative and think about, how do we support the need by collaborating? Could an attorney in Kings County, Brooklyn, where I am, support someone virtually in Maricopa County where they have less aid and help? The answer is yes, and we can do that today. So I'm really excited to be here with all of you to share this report with our partners at Clinic, who we have a long-standing relationship with. And I'm excited to hear your questions and really open myself and the Immigration Advocates Network to anyone on this webinar that wants to collaborate with us to really bring the tools of justice to every corner of this country. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Rodrigo. Next, we'll hear from Don Kerwin. Don, please go ahead.
Thank you, and thanks to Steve and to Anna and to Rodrigo, for really all that they've done over the years to to build legal capacity and related capacity too around the country. It's great to have them with us today. I think I wanted to start by saying that, you know, the rule of law is not just about immigration enforcement. It's about mostly access to justice. And you can't have the rule of law or access to justice without legal representation in our immigration system. Our report kind of makes the additional point that in our current environment, legal representation, legal services has been, and unfortunately remains, the main legalization program that's available to people. And when there is finally legalization legislation that passes, this network will be equally important in terms of implementing that program. The report describes the importance of community-based legal service providers, and it identifies major gaps in service for low-income immigrants. CMS has been doing a lot of what we call person-centered research. That is, research whose starting point is the experience of immigrants, and that is directed at NGOs and CBOs as well as at government agencies. And we're hoping that this study, you know, offers a blueprint for where legal capacity needs to be built. Thank you for the positive feedback, and we're very thrilled to hear that EOIR is using the report already. We particularly hope it will be useful to CBOs, to immigrant-led agencies, to foundations, and to government agencies too that are seeking to empower, to serve, and to protect immigrants. We knew going into this study, based on an earlier study that we did on implementation of the DACA program, how important local contexts are, and we come out of this study kind of with that very much in mind. It's where the capacity is going to be built is on the local level, so we're hopeful that it's useful to local communities. The study captures a lot of valuable information, but it's not perfect. And I kind of wanted to talk about what it doesn't do too. It doesn't speak to the other kinds of immigrant legal capacity that's available for low-income immigrants apart from charitable legal immigration programs. And we know that there's representation by small practitioners, by pro bono attorneys, by law school clinics, and actually by, you know, kind of a less positive thing, of course, by notarios too. So immigrants are getting legal services from other places too. Also, it doesn't speak to the immigrant and refugee populations actually being served by the charitable legal immigration programs in these communities. And I think that matters a lot because some programs, you know, based on their location, their staffing, their history, or their mission, may concentrate their work on particular groups or particular services. We know that that happens, but this study is not capturing that. The report focuses on charitable programs that mostly assist immigrants with applications and petitions before USCIS. And of course, that plays a major role in kind of special implementation of special legal status programs like TPS and DACA and any legislation that passes. Some of the programs provide removal defense, but the fact is that that's not the focus of this network at this point. There's not a huge number of second level accredited or fully accredited representatives at this point. And that's an area that we could all focus on and kind of improve on, I think. The study doesn't cover how programs use technology or strategic partnerships to expand capacity, what Rodrigo was speaking about, or use navigators or community helpers or other types of professionals or experts to expand capacity. So I guess all of this is a way to say that that there's a lot of studies in our future, perhaps, you know, and that there's the need for more studies. And one that I've kind of had my eye on for a long time is a larger study that's not just limited to legal immigration, but that covers all the kinds of needs that immigrants have, all the legal needs that they have. And in fact, there hasn't been such a study since, I think, 1985, when a guy named Robert Bach did one. And what I mean by that is, yes, there's immigration needs, but there's also labor needs. There's also unpaid workers out there. There's also landlord-tenant issues. There's also family legal needs, there's bankruptcy, there's, the basic poverty needs that the Legal Services Corporation attorneys meet. And so I think we should think about kind of where we might go with studies in the future. Just a couple of thoughts on what surprised us and what didn't surprise us. Of course, it was not surprising to us, and I'm sure to nobody on this call, that there's not enough overall legal capacity. That was widely known. Maybe the numbers are jarring. They were a bit jarring, but overall we knew that. It was surprising is a number of you raised that some states with significant legal capacity, very significant legal capacity, and large immigrant populations have well below the national average of charitable legal capacity per undocumented residents. So states like Florida and New Jersey and Arizona and Virginia and counties like Tarrant County and even LA County and metropolitan areas like Dallas and Phoenix and Houston and others. And I think this finding in part speaks to the concentration of low income and undocumented immigrants in those jurisdictions. 7 states in the US are home to 64% of the undocumented population. That's amazing. The 15 largest metropolitan areas are home to 54% of the undocumented, and the 15 largest counties to 33% of the undocumented. So there's obviously massive needs in those places. And the fact that there's a lot of recognizable capacity doesn't mean that there's enough capacity. It also surprised me quite a bit how much the categories of legal capacity or legal service professionals vary by jurisdiction. So a place like Miami or West Palm has far more attorneys than accredited representatives, whereas a city like Phoenix has far more accredited representatives than attorneys. It seems to me that part of what the report does is it doesn't just show that there's legal needs, but it also generally in these places, but it lays out a roadmap for the kinds of legal professionals that might be needed in some of these places and kind of potential places where EOIR might be more active or the pro bono bar might be more active in terms of pro bono representation or whatever. And our recommendations are fairly straightforward. We need more legal capacity everywhere. That's what the report basically finds, but particularly in capacity deserts. On the other hand, I think it's important to just, as a cautionary thing, say that you don't want to become overly dependent on federal funding. That, if anything, I think the Trump administration showed us the risk in that. If the legal programs are too dependent on federal funding or government funding, they're at risk, right? Kind of when different administrations come into office. Another finding, if there were more coordinated data collection among service providers, there could be more precise and valuable studies and more kind of targeted capacity building in places. And that kind of planning, I think, and the work that comes out of it, it clearly needs to be supported. That's not going to happen just kind of accidentally. There needs to be some kind of organized plan to kind of figure out how to do data collection. Even though we were relying on great data from our 3 partners here, really great, and we're very grateful for their participation in this. And then I think DHS and USCIS, they need to provide better data on representation of persons with applications and petitions before them. That's very hard to come by. And there's not a lot of information on the difference that representation makes in case outcomes for people with applications and petitions before the USCIS. And then I guess finally, we do, as past research has shown, have kind of a legalization program before us, and that is that we know that there's a large undocumented population. Most of the studies say around 15% of the undocumented who are eligible for something but haven't pursued it, whether that's because they don't know it or can't afford it. And so that large legalization program is as simple as screening of the undocumented around the country, but that too would require capacity and resources to do. But if there were tomorrow a legalization program that passed Congress, the 2 million people or even 1 million people were potentially eligible for, all of the funders and a lot of the localities would be lining up to fund it. And like what I'd like to say and what the report says is there is such a program, and it's called legal screening of the undocumented around the country. So it's available to us now. So I think that's it. We hope that the report is useful. We hope it leads to more services. We hope it helps people plan. That's what we were trying to accomplish with it. And thank you to all of our partners on it. We couldn't have done it without you. And sorry it took so long to produce, but they do take a long time. That's it, Melissa.
Thank you, Don. And thank you to the rest of our speakers for really insightful and important remarks on this issue. So now we have a couple of minutes left for our Q&A session. So I'm going to read some of the questions we're getting from the audience. The first one is asking whether this report only covers immigration cases and if we have any thoughts about other areas like housing. So feel free to answer, anybody.
Well, I mean, yes, it does. It covers immigration, legal needs, and we do have other thoughts about them. It's just that the field, the immigrant rights field, I guess you'd say, is a bit siloed in that way. And there really haven't been a lot of cross-cutting studies that look more holistically at immigrants' legal needs, not for a long time.
Thank you, Don. We also received another question about becoming a DOJ accredited representative. So the question is, I'm considering pursuing training to be a DOJ accredited representative, which would involve a career change. Two things give me a lot of pause. It currently takes 9 to 12 months after submitting your application for accreditation before you get approved due to background checks. And I'm not clear on how quickly you can transfer your organizational affiliation and whether you would be hired after pursuing this training. For example, why would someone hire me if they could hire an attorney or someone who's readily available? And if it's difficult to move from one organization to another once you're accredited, is it really advisable to plan and to get into this as a job? Are there any plans to address these issues?
Well, I may tag team that with Anna because Clinic has produced some wonderful guides on how to apply to become an accredited representative, training, and so forth. We also have, EOIR has some useful guides, even some videos that are posted on our website that explain the process. There's a series of frequently asked questions to help people understand the way it works. Generally speaking, though, you don't apply as an individual to become an accredited representative. Rather, you need to be hired or work for, employed by a recognized organization, an organization that already has recognition from Department of Justice. And then they would petition, well, not petition, but it's kind of like a petition. They would apply for you to become an accredited representative. Once you leave that organization, you lose the accredited representative status. However, it is generally easier, or it's easier to review a case of someone who had previously served as an accredited representative at another organization in order to determine if they're qualified, if they have the right qualifications, experience in order to serve. So it does help you if you move organizations, but this is not a transferable kind of thing. It's based upon the organization. And I would just refer, I just kick it over to Anna if she has anything to add there.
Thanks, Steve. And thank you so much for the question. I would encourage the questioner, I would encourage you to visit our website at www.cliniclegal.org. And we actually have a whole section on DOJ accreditation, recognition and accreditation, and great materials there from people far more expert than I in DOJ RNA processes. It's all our teams that do this. So please, I'd encourage you to do that. And if you don't find an answer there, feel free to, feel free to email me, agallagher@cliniclegal.org, and I'll funnel your question to the expert.
And I would add one more thing that, why wouldn't the organization hire an attorney? Well, first of all, attorneys cost more money. Their salaries are higher, which result in it harder for the organization to maintain that and keep services, pro bono services or low cost services affordable. And secondly, there are not enough attorneys at the moment. There's a terrible dearth of immigration attorneys out there, not enough. And so we need more folks with other varied experience getting into the field. And the RNA program is one way in which to increase that.
Thank you, Stephen and Anna. I'm going to move on to our next question. Use of technology may be able to expand legal consultations for some respondents, but virtual court proceedings can present significant due process concerns, particularly for child respondents who often have trouble understanding and participating in proceedings even when they take place in person. Can the panelists discuss ideas for how to balance, expand use of technology with due process concerns?
Maybe Rodrigo, can I take a stab just first at just thinking about a case, just straight up casework. I've been practicing immigration law before I came to clinic for years and years. And I look at the use of technology to prepare cases as much as possible, right? To do your legal screening, to talk to witnesses, to talk to your client, perhaps to get colleagues that live in the same jurisdiction as your client, to meet with the client in person, to identify resources, for example, social workers, psychologists, etc., and do all that prep work, right? And I actually do believe that for the removal hearing, for the merits hearing, you should be sitting next to your client. I understand too that there's, that in many cases that can happen, or if you're representing, for example, we did a lot of detained work, do we go to the prison facility or do we stay in the court, etc. There's a lot of considerations, but I actually think a lot of the upfront work I think technology is brilliant for that. And like, as Rodrigo said, you have an attorney in Queens, right? And this is what we did with the border project. We had all these attorneys across the country that couldn't necessarily go to the border for consultations. But once they did consultations and screen cases, then they would agree to take cases and to go to the jurisdiction and represent people when they came into the United States in court. So Rodrigo, I pass it over to you now.
Yeah, no, that was a great response. And I agree 100% with Anna. We're very mindful about how we approach problems and where we think technology can or can't assist. We know that there's nothing like a human being helping you, holding your hand, just like there's nothing like a real judge seeing you and listening to your case. So I think we share Anna's position on that front. The tools that we've built over the years do the part that I think Anna flagged as areas for opportunity, right? They help folks understand their status for relief. So our tool immi.org, immi.org, is essentially an immigration benefits wizard. It helps you understand if you're undocumented, what you might be eligible for. Our tool Citizenship Works helps you fill out the N-400, helps you understand your eligibility to become a US citizen, and connects you to an advocate that either lives in your community and whose office you can visit, or an advocate that's available to support you remotely. So it's a DOJ accredited rep or an attorney. And so I think whenever we approach a problem, we are very thoughtful about whether technology can or can't play a role and what kind of technology plays a role. We also think a lot about data privacy and security. Our tool IMMI, for instance, immi.org, doesn't ask you for your name or any information that might, that you might consider that you'd like to reserve for yourself. So I think it's all about the balance that you draw, and us as designers, as advocates, we really come to, as immigrants ourselves, right? We come to this problem space, really thinking about the human experience and thinking about how our technology is being used ethically and where it's advancing the cause of the people who we're trying to help ultimately. So that's a great question.
Thank you, Anna and Rodrigo. So our next question is directed at Stephen, and that's, can EOIR share how many people have served as friends of the court?
Thanks for the question. When it comes to programs that we fund, like the Legal Orientation Program, Family Group Legal Orientation Program, Immigration Court Help Desk, Legal Orientation Program for Custodians of Children, yes, we track that. However, because that's a data point that we ask our contractors to collect. However, we do not track, to my knowledge, in any way, easy way at the moment, folks appearing outside of these contract programs just through voluntary efforts and so forth. So I can verify that, but I don't believe we're tracking that as a data point.
Thank you, Stephen. Our next question is a little more forward-looking as far as our research, but it asks, how can we use data to tap into the large community of private immigration attorneys who already practice and are well-versed in immigration law to provide pro bono legal services to immigrants in need?
Well, I mean, I would say that that's maybe, if you were to do kind of a broader legal needs, legal capacity study, you would try to do that. And there's a lot of networks that very extensively use pro bono legal counsel. You know, you think of an agency like Kids in Need of Defense, or, you know, the ABA Commission, or a lot of the detention programs. I mean, there's a lot of the Association of the Bar of the City of New York here. You know, there's just a lot of agencies that use pro bono networks quite extensively. I think the challenge is that they're, as I understand it, fairly tapped out. I mean, it's a pretty unique, Anna could speak about this, Rodrigo could speak about it better than I could, but it's a pretty unique time in terms of the demand for services, you know, and but it wouldn't, I don't think it'd be difficult to get a sense of kind of how large those networks were, because they're as tapped out as possible.
Yeah, I would just add, and I agree, Don, and they are tapped out, and I think post-COVID especially, right? So just these last two to 3 years, and also the American Immigration Lawyers Association, AILA. I think, you know, they do quite a bit, you know, that's a really strong network, and they do quite a bit of pro bono work. It'd be a great idea. This might be the subject of your next research, Don. We'll walk away from this with a list.
I'm on it.
Okay, well, we'll find the funding. I'll look for the funding. Rodrigo and I.
Yeah, I just want to add, we would love to, you know, work with AILA or others to expand even our network. Our network is publicly accessible. Everyone here can go to immigrationlawhelp.org and find one of the providers on our list. But, you know, this data set is also took us a lot of work to gather. It took us a lot of phone calls, a lot of scraping of existing information, and it's maintained by advocates. So we do a certain amount of screening, you know, as well. We make sure that we don't let in the bad actors that we're all familiar with. So I think we would probably want to do something similar with some of the private bar folks. But no, we want to empower everyone through information. And so we would be happy to collaborate with everyone here on building that broader data set. But if you're a provider and you're on this call right now, you can go to Immigration Law Help and submit your organization's information there, or tell us if you want it updated, by the way. So yeah, help us keep growing this resource.
I mean, I think, just to be clear, like some of the complexities, you know, that the three networks kind of represented in this study, which are terrific networks, but they collect slightly different information on different timelines, and that so if you were to plan this and then add additional kind of pro bono representatives, bar association projects, the whole kind of universe of pro bono or low cost services, then it gets, more complicated. So it's kind of the point that to do this right, you'd really need kind of a process that involved anybody that wanted to participate in it to figure out how to the extent you could, what you wanted to know and how you could harmonize data collection moving forward. And that's a complicated thing. And then of course, if you wanted to do another type of study that looked at immigrant legal needs, there'd be beyond immigration, there'd be other ways to do that. And it probably would be too difficult to start off trying to make that a national study. You'd probably want to focus on particular communities, as the last one did.
Mm-hmm.
You'd be surveying immigrants in particular places.
I just want to add to something that was brought up earlier. I think someone brought up this point. The need is obvious across legal issues, right? It's not just immigration law, it's housing, it's labor, it's Don made this point. And we recognize that as well. So, as Ian, as the Immigrant Advocates Network, we're thinking, we actually just developed a tool to help folks in New York State file a wage theft complaint if they're experience wage theft and are primarily Spanish speaking. This is a tool that we developed during the prior administration because every path to status was being closed to us. So I think as advocates, it's good to get out of our own corner, and we hope that we can develop our own data set of every worker center in the US or every housing attorney in the US, because these are resources that our communities also need. And obviously these issues are intersectional. So yes, also happy to work with anyone here on that.
Thank you, everyone. I think we have time for just one more question and we can close with that. The question is, what is the best way for community-based organizations to work with the EOIR to collect information that they need to understand their problems and missions?
Well, thank you for the question. EOIR conducts several stakeholder meetings across the country periodically. These would be typically with organizations that are in touch with our legal education resources service or Congressional Legislative Affairs Division. Long story short is send me an email. I'll put my email in here, and I'll fill you in on any information that we have regarding upcoming stakeholder engagements, as well as if you've got new ideas for stakeholder engagements. I'm sure would love to hear them.
I think I'd like to maybe just take 30 seconds, Melissa, and just go around. People could say any closing comments they might have, but I wanted to pick up on Rodrigo's the use of the word intersectional. I think that's the right word to use, because it's not just kind of intersectional in terms of other bodies of law, but it's also the immigration cases themselves are intersectional, a lot of them, if you think about it, the U visas or the VAWA work or whatever it might be. So, so even within immigration, there's intersectionality going on. And I also wanted to not leave with the impression that immigration legal services is a small issue or a lower level need, because I think we all know that it's not, and the last time there was a huge study, the #1 legal need was immigration, and I'd imagine it would still be kind of very, very high up there. So it's important, I think it's important and valuable to focus on immigrant legal services to low income people and then expand out from there. Both of them are really important.
Thanks, Don. So I'm going to open up the floor to the rest of our speakers. please share your closing comments with us when you're ready.
I'll just jump in quickly and just say, just to follow up with Don, I completely agree. The intersectionality, and also, but what I always think is that, you know, a green card or work permit or some form of status opens the door and may somehow alleviate the need for other legal services, just because, you know, just a small amount, right? It just opens that door and gives you additional rights. You are part of your community. So I think it's vital. And I also think it's intersectionally. So the two things I'm walking away from here is thinking more and more about technology. And I just wrote down, Don, I think you said it. I mean, what Ian does is brilliant. The way they've used technology to do these initial screenings, to give people information, to gather the data is urgent and necessary. And then more coordinated data gathering among immigration legal services. How great would it be if we could get Microsoft or some big tech company to give us the tool and fund and we, you know, to train immigration legal services providers in gathering data that will empower them, and then showing impact from that, meaning support, more funding, you know, recognition by the local governments of what happens when people don't get legal representation. And then finally, unusual partners, always reaching out to other people that we're not thinking about that can support these efforts in expanding immigration legal services and raising these issues. The importance of them. So thank you very much. Thank you to CMS for organizing this, for my colleagues, and to all the folks that have attended. I really appreciate all your work and commitment.
Thank you, Anna. Rodrigo, please go ahead.
Thanks, Lisa. No, just thank you again to CMS and Don and Evin and Melissa, and obviously Anna and Stephen. This data is gonna, I think, and this analysis is really gonna impact our work. I hope it impacts funding to areas that are in higher need than Kings County, you know, where I am, even though we have a large need here as well. I'm also, you know, really excited to hear that folks share the vision of, you know, using technology where it makes sense to really close the gap and connect the dots nationally or even locally. I did want to mention we're working with the city of Houston to kind of develop a kind of universal intake system for a number of providers there, to really have that no wrong door approach and really think about how to connect people to assistance where it makes sense and how it makes sense. So I think the information that you've provided, especially around the Houston, Woodland, Sugar Land County being completely underserved, is something that we're going to take to heart in that project. But thanks again, and I think I've done more than 30 seconds, but please reach out. You can find us at immigrantatadvocates.org or elsewhere.
Hi, folks. Thanks very much to the CMS team and my fellow panelists. Please, my message for you is to please engage with the OIR, please engage with the immigration court folks. We earnestly welcome your ideas, your understanding as to where the need is, and more importantly, additional ways in which we can facilitate involvement by those who can help, as well as ways in which the court can better accommodate the needs of folks.
Thank you, everyone. Evin, please go ahead if you have any final comments.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank you for your all collaboration for data collection. And I just want to, end up saying that, some areas offer a large number of legal services. Even these efforts are still not enough because of the large number of need. We see these efforts make a difference in certain areas, showing the importance of these efforts, and we thank everyone in the field. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Evin. And I just wanted to take a moment to thank all of our speakers for all of your insights and your amazing presentations. For more information, I left some links in the chat, and you can go to our website at cmsny.org to see the full report. Thank you and have a good day.